As George mentioned, I'm the CEO General Manager at Oahe Electric Cooperative. We're located in Blunt, South Dakota. We serve Hughes, Sully, and part of Potter County as a nonprofit electric utility. We'll kick this off. I'm here to talk about fertilizer, but I figured I'd give you guys the respect for everything you do for everyone. This is where we serve Hughes, Sully County up to the river and into Potter County. Anyhdrous Ammonia. You're probably wondering how I came up with or became involved with Anyhdrous. Now, to be transparent, I don't own Anyhdrous. This is a potential member, just like all of you in the room. Raise a hands, who all takes electricity from an electric cooperative or any products delivered to elevators that are cooperatives? Come on, don't be bashful. A lot of people. A lot of people. Anyhdrous's one goal is to provide cheap fertilizer to all of you. And my goal is to provide them electricity as a cooperative to put multiple locations in our area to serve all of these loads. Technology and infrastructure-based company, they deploy systems where the price of ammonia is typically high. Now, what would cause the price of ammonia or any fertilizer, not just anhydrous, but any fertilizer in our area is trucking, freight, rail, handling. Right? So we got a ton of costs in our area. Anyhdrous fixes the price 10 to 15 years locked. 10 to 15 year contracts locked at $430 a ton for straight anhydrous. First person that answers, I forgot my Reese's. I was going to ask you guys questions, but she has some over on the table. What's the ratio on the anhydrous per unit of actual N? 82? You get a Reese's. Can I steal one of those? Is that you, Treg? There you go. Hopefully you didn't eat too much dessert. 10 to 15 year price fix on the pricing. Independent contracts. Very quick deployable company. Based out of, for background for Anyhdrous, the founders are out of San Diego, California, and out of Michigan. Rural remote sites. That's the purpose of it. They're trying to bring fertilizer that's affordable, reliable to people at the use site. What's that mean? Less freight. Many systems, most fertilizer plants are producing 100,000 up to 1 million tons a year of fertilizer. These produce around 7,500 tons per site. We can ramp it, that's mentioned here. I'll get into that later, but basically I monitor the electrical markets. They can go as low as 40% of the year run time, meaning that they need 40% of the hours in a year to produce the anhydrous to meet capacity. This is what a system looks like. This is going to be really hard to see for some of you guys, but we'll share the slides with you after the fact. This is what a site looks like. They sit on roughly a half an acre. Typically they buy 2.5 acres just to block off the whole system, you know, for site security. Modular, container-sized units. They have a synthesis loop that is patented that creates ammonia. The question that I will ask you is, what do you need? And whoever answers this one gets another Reese's. What do you need to produce ammonia? What's needed? Right? Water? CO2. What else? What's historically used? The big one. That nitrogen, hydrogen, nat gas. You guys familiar with natural gas markets? You know how big of a pain those are? Natural gas hedges. This one doesn't require natural gas. So it doesn't need to be sited on a natural gas pipeline. You can put them anywhere. Markets, we talked about this briefly. 425 to 430 bucks a ton. That's on the average ammonia market right there. And that's through September of 2024. You're talking 10 to 15 year contracts at 425 to 430 bucks, fixed pricing contracts. It's a big deal. Now you're going to ask what the hiccup is. They're relying on the 45V credits. What's a 45V credit? That's the law that was put into law effectively by U.S. Congress and takes an act of law to repeal. In order to repeal it, they need a 2/3 vote. When's the last time we saw a 2/3 vote on anything that was brought through Congress? Doesn't happen very often. In the event that they did agree to repeal it, from the installation date of a plant, they have a 10-year window to continue operating that plant. So if you sign a 10-year contract and let's say Trump goes and signs an executive order and Congress votes 2/3 on it to kill it, you still have a 10-year operating window of that plant, which also aligns with this company's depreciation schedule. They're depreciating the plants in 10 years. Plant useful life is actually closer to 30. CO2 emissions, 1.6 to 2.6 tons of ammonia, depending on the plant efficiency, which would be how much we curtail or run the plants. The tax credits are worth $540 per ton, and that's where that price is going down to that $425, $430. They're not essentially a nonprofit, but in a lot of ways, Talus is a nonprofit. This is that process, we talked about, I think it was Todd Yackley that mentioned what was used to make anhydrous. The difference is right here. Nat gas versus air goes through a Haber-Bosch process, which essentially is what they call an electrolyzer. I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds on it. And then they need water. The difference between most plants is that the water that these companies use doesn't have to be treated. So you're talking artesian wells. You're talking max per site 20,000 gallons a day. So if you had a couple 300-gallon wells, that's the water they're going to take is out of the reservoir. That's already permitted and has to be studied by the DANR. So we're not draining our deep reservoirs, but there's no need so we eliminated the nat gas pipe and water access. We aren't taking away water from the public. It's already state monitored. We aren't taking away gas infrastructure. Very different process. Stop me at any time if anyone has questions, but kind of breezing through some of this. So we want to go through a little bit of the risks that they've laid out for us. You have to have clean power. And how many of you guys like windmills? Not very many. I don't see very many hands. They need clean power. Well, clean power right now that's online is predominantly wind. What we're trying to do is figure out a long-term solution with nuclear. Nuclear is considered clean. It doesn't burn a fossil fuel to produce. And long-term, our goal is to put in small modular reactors, not just for this project, I'm talking about the entire U.S. infrastructure, to produce nuclear plants that can serve loads like these. Which is why I don't see this 45V or 45Q, a lot of that stuff's not going anywhere. It's here, and it's going to be here to stay. The final ruling on it, they just had one, January 3rd, and it's a law. Again, that 2/3 vote to repeal that's going to take some serious gunpowder. I mean, you're going to have to piss a lot of people off to get that repealed. Sites. Okay, so this is Talus's site map. They've already done FEED studies on, front-end engineering and design, FEED, that are ready for permitting, not necessarily permitted, but are ready as far as an engineering standpoint, and they have the corn users in the area to utilize nitrogen. That's going to be a majority of what this is used for, especially if it's strictly anhydrous to start with. A majority of you are going to use it on corn. You're not going to be putting it on wheat. You're going to knife it in the fall more than likely, and then use it in the spring. So you're thinking of all of these sites. You look at this area, look how many we have. Sully, Hughes, Potter, even up into Central Electric's territory, closer towards FEM could get some. you know, you'd be up in that south of Aberdeen, south of Ipswich, south of Bowdle areas. So out of all these sites, why in the hell are they targeting these? If they have 100 to choose from, why would they target South Dakota, right? And why Oahe? Why would they use us to talk to all of you as our members? Here's why. Focus on the chart on the left. And this might be kind of hard to see. The largest two fertilizer plants, or two of the largest in the United States, are in Beulah, North Dakota, Basin Electric owned, which anyone that's a Cooperative electricity member owns part of. Beulah only trucks 250 miles. They don't deliver anything past that. So anything else has to be produced into urea or liquid and trucked. The other one's Spencer, Iowa. If you look at the pricing map on this, you can see that fertilizer pricing closer to the plants is cheaper here, and our fertilizing price due to freight is a lot more expensive. A lot more expensive. All of that stuff's truck or railed in. Now this is where it gets fun for me because we're into somewhat electricity. This is a price contour map of electricity pricing. So this one's fertilizer, right here, and you can see the purple's cheaper. This is electricity. Blue's cheaper, purple's really cheap. That's actually negative pricing if you're buying on the market, which means that if Talus was online, they'd be getting paid to use electricity during certain peaks. And I actually took this snip 9 a.m. yesterday, this one here. That was the real-time price of electricity at 9 a.m. yesterday. I'm getting a little feedback over here. So you look at where the Spencer plant is down here. Well, yeah, they have negative pricing and they have cheaper fertilizer. But look at this bubble. See how that floats into our area? So if we have this here, that creates downward pressure on fertilizer pricing if it's here, and it splits the two distances. All right, on to the next. So development, we're looking at 4 to 8 systems with Oahe. They can deploy 15 of these systems at 7,500 tons of straight anhydrous within the next 18 months-ish. They have 2 sites in conjunction with this project out by Phillips, South Dakota, near a wind project there that is actually having a hard time exporting wind. They can't get wind onto the grid, so they're just using it to take load to be made whole. A lot of that's going to be trucked into, I mean, there's not a lot of corn grown in the Phillip area, I'm sure you're all aware of. That's going to get trucked towards us. CI score. This one's really important to tie in. So ringneck ethanol is in a 51 to 52 point CI score as part of the most recent Greek model for 2024. If ringneck can drop that, 7.2 points is roughly what, does anyone know the CI score of corn before I tell you? Corn that you produce in your field, what it adds to an ethanol plant? Anybody? 15. With freight, on average, this is nationally, is around 29. So if you take 7.2 off with this, it would drop an ethanol plant CI score 7.2 points. So if you look at back down to here, we talked about Beulah, North Dakota plant. They have the one in Iowa. These all get trucked. All of them get trucked, which increases your CI score. Now, why is it important to bring up an ethanol plant? If you're delivering corn with a reduction of 7.2 to an ethanol plant and it drops their CI score, they get a 5-cent premium per gallon on ethanol. So if we take Ringneck, for example, they're a 93 million gallon ethanol plant roughly, permitted for 100 million. That's around 4.65 million a year net profit for them. So they can afford to pay you a premium on it if it lowers their CI score to open their California market. Capacity factor we talked on, 50 to 60%, they can drop as low as 40%. Basically what that means is that 40% of the hours in a year, or 50% of the hours in the year, they can afford to make that amount of ammonia while curtailing during peak. So, daytime comes on, or in the winters we typically see peak in mornings and evenings. Midday there's nothing, overnight there's nothing because people are sleeping. It's usually morning and evening. Summertime it's between noon and around 8, 9 p.m. So during those times, if they're curtailing, they'd be offline. That's where that capacity factor comes in. These are partners that we've already brought to the table on this project that have worked with both Talus and Oahe. Ringneck Energy, the ethanol we mentioned, to take corn that's using this fertilizer, this cheaper fertilizer, any of the corn that's produced with it, Ringneck's willing to take at a premium to lower their CI score. We figured in total, Ringneck alone at 93 million gallons, we would need 8 sites, and that's where the 4 to 8 sites came up earlier in the presentation. Landis, which is mostly Iowa-based. Wilbur Ellis, that's one in our area. They're more interested in eastern South Dakota, in the tillage area, as Dwayne would call it. And then Black Sheep Agronomy here in Agar. I think we have Black Sheep in the room. I don't know if we have anyone from Ringneck in the room. But so we're looking to put these online fairly quickly. Okay, so this slide is pretty important, and I might try to get out of the way so you all can see this. There's one thing on this slide that I want you to focus on. Exports versus imports. Look at the countries. China's importing fertilizer. Russia's exporting fertilizer. These are ratios. Europe importing, US importing, Trinidad exporting, and other countries are importing. So the 2 countries with a hedge right now are Trinidad and Russia. And the one I want you to pay attention to is Russia. This isn't just about bringing fertilizer that's more affordable to you guys. It does essentially become a national security risk in that you're trying to maintain our food production, and right now we don't have enough fertilizer produced in the country to even maintain what we're consuming right now. And the biggest exporter of fertilizer in the world is Russia. What do you think happens if we have a conflict with Russia? You think they're going to send us any more fertilizer? Not a chance in hell. No way. That's that 7.2 point that I mentioned on the CI score. That's the reduction. Any ethanol plant that's using it, CI score drops 7.2. Right now, how that accreditation works with 45V is the certificates are actually directly assigned to the farmer. So whatever ethanol plant you contract the corn with would determine your negotiations on forfeiting that CI score. If you're a farmer and you're using the fertilizer and you keep the CI score accreditation, there's not really anything you can do with it. You can't resell it, but you can use it as a bargaining tool to say, I want a premium for this crop that was produced using green ammonia, using air and water rather than natural gas to produce fertilizer. So this one is just an overview of how we want them to operate. We want them to be low, basically keep what I call station service power or auxiliary power online when we aren't seeing peaks in electricity, or when we are seeing peaks, excuse me. So let's say it's a peak right here. They ramp down to 10% of total site, basically keep the motors warm, keep the process trickling. And then when the price of electricity drops, you open up the faucets and they're full bore. This one, I took wind generation. We talked about wind earlier. Very, very, very volatile resource. So when you think of capacity accreditation, we're managed by the RTOs that I showed you earlier. That southwest power pool here, if I go back a few slides, right there, right here. So that's our balancing authority. So we're basically balancing this entire network. Basically Montana, Minnesota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, part of Texas, part of New Mexico. If load doesn't match generation, you have to shut off load or put on generation. So if you're bidding wind into the next day and you're assuming it's going to be flat, wind is the orange line. If you're assuming it's going to be flat, you're wrong. I mean, welcome to South Dakota, right? One day that you want to go outside and get some work done, the wind's going to be 90 miles an hour, and then when you want to be home on Christmas and not have to go out and do anything, it's going to be perfectly calm, you know. Talus load, how we have this modeled, is going to mimic wind, and the reason why I use wind is because it's the most volatile resource and it's the largest resource online that has that volatility. You know, they have roughly 50,000 gigawatts worth of wind online, which would feed 500 million homes if it was all online all the time. There's not 500 million homes in the US. I mean, there's just not. And if you model this on wind volatility, you're making sure you cover your ass, essentially is what we're doing here. So wind is what we'll try to trend to see when that injection happens into the market and shut off whenever that pricing, so if wind shuts down, you know, they're going to be offline. They're going to track wind over any other resource, our base load resources, because wind is the most volatile. You know, solar panels, sun's going to come up every day. It might be cloudy, might be rainy, there might be snow on the panels, but the sun's going to come up and it's going to set. Wind, you don't know. It's harder to model. These are just a few case studies we did. This was a deployment, a microsystem. So the ones they're deploying, they call Talus 10s, would be for our area. This is about a tenth of the size. This one's actually in Kenya. Off-grid, they're trying to grow crops. They had access to water via wells in Kenya. They put in solar to serve this just to see if they could bring fertilizer into an area in Kenya that didn't have it before. So they used solar to power this plant as a test study. So that's the first one they did ever. This is the one in Boone, Iowa that they just deployed. So this would be the site. It's near an elevator. You know, they have rail access. They put in some small solar, but not enough to power the plant. Eagle Grove's their second Talus 10 site that they're actually building right now, Eagle Grove, Iowa. So they'll have two in Iowa and then whatever comes into our area. And I'll share these slides, you guys. I'm kind of short for time, so. Some other experienced key advisors on their team, some that you might know, Brian Rounds, he's outside of Pierre, and then the former CEO of General Motors, Rick Wagner, are on their team. Key takeaways, this is important. Committed to serving Oahe members, not just Oahe, because obviously I don't serve all of Potter County or counties north of us or across the river, but we're trying to bring low fertilizer costs to the area. Very opportunistic for rates because we can operate during low pricing. 45Z premiums, you lock them with 10, 15-year contracts. Each site that they're looking at, so we talked 4 to 8 up to 15, is $270,000 per year of kilowatt hour tax to local school districts. The two that are nearest to us are ABO in Oneida and Hovind, our non-state funded schools. That money all stays at those schools, which does what? Requires less money from the county, which puts your property tax pressure downward. Anything you're paying on property tax. One last point I want to touch on before I answer some questions here. How many of you guys have tracked, I don't want opinions on which side, but how many of you guys have tracked the Summit Carbon and Navigator Carbon pipelines? Show of hands. Pretty much everyone? Yeah. So, and we're not for or against it. If that doesn't go through, who knows how to make urea from ammonia? What does it take? I know you know. Yep. And what's one of the biggest carbon dioxide producers in our counties? Fermentation tanks off ethanol plants. Whoops, I think I just ended my presentation. That's okay though, we got the key points. But if in the event that one of those projects doesn't go through, you could utilize that CO2 off those ethanol plants to take the ammonia, the CO2 off the fermentation tanks, and produce urea off of it, long-term goal. Short-term goal, I could see a lot of people that irrigate using it up front, people strip tilling it in the fall, that no-till, to utilize the cheaper fertilizer pricing for anhydrous. And I think with that, I'm about out of time. I'll take some questions from you guys. Yeah, go ahead.
So right now you're mostly just targeting NH3?
Yeah, yep.
It don't seem to be real popular in this part of the world.
Right.
Do you foresee that being a problem, or is how hard is it to get it into
The question is they're just targeting NH3 right now, but in the future, is it going to be other sources as far as liquid or dry?
Right.
Urea, like you just brought up.
Right, right. Yeah, so as of now, they're strictly targeting NH3, and the reason why is because farmers can store NH3. That's state law. You don't have to have any permitting done to store NH3 on your farms. And you need enough of these facilities before you can really implement a large scale urea plant. I mean, you're going to need 5 to 10 of these systems online before you can do it. So to start with, get our foot in the door. It'd be nice to bring a couple of them, test it, see how it works. You know, a lot of it will be the strip tilling into the fall, and then irrigation customers that are going to use it year round. 3 people per site. So not a huge employee offtake. The biggest thing is going to be storage. You know, for commercial operations, the storage is really a hiccup with insurance, but if you're a farmer that has the ability to do it on site, it's a lot cheaper. Hammer away, guys. This is your time. Yeah, underground storage, that's a good point. Okay, so a lot of people don't like storing anhydrous on their farms, you know, in what I call the traditional pill bottles that are above ground. There's new technology that Talus is actually working on that you can store 500 tons underground in pipes 7 feet deep, and per acre of ground you can do 500 tons of anhydrous stored underground. Per 1 acre. And they're looking at negotiations with farmers that are near wherever they deploy the sites. If the farmer agrees to sell them the land, they can direct pipe it right into your storage facility. And you can farm over it when it's 7 feet deep.
So can I sell the anhydrous to a neighbor?
You can't sell it, but you could come up with, what I was thinking was some sort of co-location agreement with them, to where either, if let's say Talus paid for your storage, just out of theory, co-location fees for, like, what's your risk having it on your farm ground versus theirs? I mean, that'd be a case-by-case basis, how I would treat it.